The Jeep Wrangler might be the most famous off-roader today, but there are 10 tough 4x4s that could leave it behind. These machines were built to survive the hardest places on Earth: deserts, mountains, and battlefields. They're not about style or fame, they're about going where the Wrangler can't. Number 10. Mitsubishi Pajero Gen 1, 1982 to 1991. The original Mitsubishi Pajero wasn't just another SUV. It was a purpose-built off-roader that earned its stripes in the world's toughest terrain before most people in the West even knew it existed. Launched in 1982, the Gen 1 Pajero came with something that modern off-roaders lack: mechanical honesty. No gimmicks, just real hardware, a ladder frame chassis, part-time four-wheel drive with a true low-range transfer case, and solid axle rear suspension for durability. The short wheelbase version had a nimble 92-inch wheelbase, giving it a breakover angle most modern trucks would envy. And those short overhangs? They made the Pajero shockingly agile on tight mountain trails. Under the hood, it offered engines like the 2.5-liter turbo diesel Ford D56, which became legendary for its torque delivery and indestructibility. This engine wasn't about speed, it was about torque at crawl speed, and it delivered just that. Over 144 pound-feet at just 2,000 RPM, ideal for rock crawling and deep mud. You could literally idle this engine up a trail while the Wrangler spun its tires. And this isn't just theory. The Pajero won the Dakar Rally 12 times, with most wins built off this first-gen platform. No Wrangler, stock or modified, has ever come close to that kind of real-world endurance racing dominance. Mitsubishi proved their chassis could handle the Sahara at full throttle day after day. Still in use across Southeast Asia, Africa, and remote regions of Australia, the Gen 1 Pajero isn't a garage queen, it's a proven overlander. While the modern Wrangler has lockers, electronics, and big marketing, the Pajero doesn't need hype. It was built to go further and outwheel the Wrangler when it truly counts. Number 9. Chevrolet K5 Blazer, 1969 to 1991. When you think of American muscle wrapped in a 4x4 body, the Chevrolet K5 Blazer stands tall, literally and figuratively. Introduced in 1969 to challenge the Ford Bronco and International Scout, the K5 Blazer wasn't just bigger, it was bolder and badder. With a full-size body-on-frame platform borrowed from the CK pickup line and standard four-wheel drive capability, it came ready for war trail or otherwise. Early models could be optioned with small block and big block V8s, including the 350 and even the 400 cubic inch engine, throwing down well over 240 horsepower and up to 400 pound-feet of torque, depending on year and configuration. That's raw grunt, something that gave the K5 the ability to pull itself in a trailer through muck, snow, or sand with unapologetic force. But it wasn't all brute. The K5 used a solid front axle, heavy-duty NP205 or NP208 transfer cases, and leaf spring suspension that was simple to lift and upgrade. Its short wheelbase, just over 106 inches in the early models, gave it a surprising breakover advantage for a full-size rig, and the ground clearance was solid right off the showroom floor. And let's not forget its military sibling, the M1009 CUCV, a diesel-powered K5 built for the US military. Stripped of frills but loaded with reliability, it served everywhere from frozen NATO bases to desert deployments. It showed the K5 wasn't just a weekend warrior, it was a battlefield-ready machine. In real life, there are stories of these trucks rescuing stranded snowmobiles in Alaska, outpulling newer trucks in mud bogs, and surviving years of abuse on ranches with little more than an oil change. That's the kind of legacy you can't fake. Today, restored K5s are gaining popularity again, not just for nostalgia, but because they represent something modern off-roaders sometimes miss: toughness you can see, hear, and feel. A lifted Wrangler looks cool in a mall parking lot, but a K5 Blazer? That's the rig that towed your dad out of a snowbank back in '85 and still had power to climb the hill. Number 8. Suzuki LJ80, 1977 to 1981. Don't let its size fool you. The Suzuki LJ80 is one of the smallest 4x4s ever built, but it has outwheeled trucks twice its size, built with one purpose: to go where others can't. This tiny Japanese off-roader didn't care about comfort or image. It was built for terrain. Under the hood was a modest 797 cubic centimeter inline 4, making just 41 horsepower and 45 pound-feet of torque, but it only had to push 1,600 pounds. That lightweight, combined with a short 80-inch wheelbase and solid axles front and rear, made the LJ80 feel like a mountain goat on wheels. The approach angle was an impressive 40 degrees, and the departure angle was around 45 numbers that would impress even modern trail rigs. The leaf spring suspension offered surprising articulation in slow-speed terrain. It featured a part-time four-wheel drive system with a low-range gearbox, letting the little Suzuki crawl over mud, roots, and rocks. In tight jungle trails of Indonesia or the winding paths of rural Pakistan, these rigs went where land cruisers couldn't even fit. Farmers, hunters, and off-grid adventurers embraced them not because they were fast, but because they never quit. Real incidents? In the remote Philippine highlands, LJ80s were used to transport crops across slopes too steep for modern pickups. And in Patagonia, several examples survived decade-long service in mining villages, maintaining daily climbs on gravel tracks that tore apart heavier vehicles. It was never a status symbol, never a luxury vehicle, and that's what makes the LJ80 so brutally effective. It proved that size doesn't matter in the dirt. All that counts is capability, and this little Suzuki, it had that in spades. Number 7. AMC Eagle SX4, 1981 to 1983. While most off-roaders took the form of boxy trucks and utility vehicles, the AMC Eagle SX4 dared to be different. It looked like a lifted coupe, and that's exactly what it was. But don't let the sporty shape fool you. Underneath, the SX4 hid legitimate off-road capability that gave it an edge over the Wrangler in places you'd never expect. AMC took their Concorde compact car platform and grafted on a full-time four-wheel drive system, one of the first of its kind for a passenger car. It used a viscous coupling center differential and Dana axles, giving it permanent traction to all four wheels without driver input. In bad weather or light trails, it simply outgripped everything in its class. Powered by a 4.2-liter inline-six, the Eagle made around 112 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque. That was respectable for its 2,800-pound weight, and thanks to its unibody construction and coil spring front suspension, it offered a surprisingly smooth ride off-road. You wouldn't rock crawl in it, but for forest roads, snowy climbs, or desert crossings, the Eagle held its own. Real-world story? In Colorado during the 1982 blizzard, multiple reports came in of Eagles being the only vehicles able to reach isolated homes on snowed-in roads, passing stuck Broncos and Wranglers along the way. And in rural Vermont, the SX4 became a cult favorite for postal carriers due to its traction and reliability in deep winter. The AMC Eagle SX4 didn't scream off-road beast, it whispered it, and then quietly proved its worth where others stalled. Today, it's largely forgotten, but its innovation paved the way for crossovers and AWD vehicles that rule modern roads. And when the snow hits hard, it could still outwheel a Wrangler, just in a very different way. Number 6. Nissan Patrol G60, 1959 to 1980. Before Nissan became a household name in the US for sedans and crossovers, they quietly built one of the most capable off-roaders the world had seen, the Nissan Patrol G60. Launched in 1959, the G60 wasn't a Wrangler rival, it was a Wrangler predecessor. In fact, in Australia and parts of the Middle East, the Patrol wasn't just respected, it was legendary. This rugged 4x4 was built on a no-nonsense ladder frame chassis, featuring solid axles front and rear and leaf spring suspension, the exact kind of setup off-roaders dream of today for maximum articulation and durability. The Patrol G60 came with part-time four-wheel drive and a proper low-range transfer case, giving it the gearing to crawl through rutted trails, sand dunes, and rocky terrain without breaking a sweat. Powering the G60 was a 4.0-liter inline-six engine, the P40, pushing out around 125 horsepower and a beefy 216 pound-feet of torque, numbers that might not seem impressive today. But when paired with its gear ratios, that engine became a torque monster in low range. It could climb steep gradients and ford rivers without hesitation. Unlike modern SUVs, this wasn't tuned for comfort, it was tuned to survive. And it did survive. One of the most famous real-world tests came during an Australian expedition in the 1960s, when the Patrol G60 became the first vehicle to cross the Simpson Desert from west to east, a brutal 1,100 sand dune journey that no American 4x4 had attempted at the time. With no backup, no support, and no GPS, the Patrol completed the crossing on sheer durability and mechanical grit. The G60 wasn't sold in large numbers in the US, but that's exactly what makes it a forgotten hero. In regions where off-roading isn't a weekend activity, but a way of life like rural Australia and war zones in Africa, the Patrol proved it could go where others broke down. Even decades later, you'll still find G60s hauling gear through jungles or patrolling remote oil fields in the Middle East. Unlike the Wrangler, which relies heavily on aftermarket support and electronic automatic driver aids today. The G60 didn't need assistance, it was built right the first time. It didn't have lockers, but it had gearing. It didn't have traction control, but it had torque. And while the Wrangler dominates trail parks, the Patrol G60 made history in deserts, jungles, and highland passes. When we talk about 4x4s that could outwheel a Wrangler, the G60 isn't just on the list, it's part of the foundation the entire off-road scene was built on. Number 5. Toyota Land Cruiser 70 Series, 1984 to 2025. If the Wrangler is the symbol of American off-road freedom, then the Toyota Land Cruiser 70 Series is the global definition of off-road survival. First launched in 1984, the J70 is still being built today not because of nostalgia, but because it's still one of the most capable 4x4s on Earth. Unlike newer SUVs wrapped in tech and comfort, the J70 is all business. Built on a bulletproof ladder frame chassis with solid axles front and rear, it features leaf springs or coils depending on the variant, both designed for maximum load-bearing and terrain articulation. You won't find terrain modes or touchscreens here. What you will find is a manual transfer case with low-range gearing, locking differentials, and the kind of mechanical simplicity that off-road purists dream of. Under the hood, the J70 has seen a variety of powertrains over the decades, but perhaps the most iconic is the 4.2-liter inline-six diesel, the 1HZ. This naturally aspirated beast produced just 129 horsepower, but a stump-pulling 210 pound-feet of torque at low RPMs. Matched to ultra-low gearing, the J70 could climb, crawl, and conquer terrain that left more powerful but electronically dependent rigs stranded. Modern variants now feature a 4.5-liter V8 turbo diesel, making over 300 pound-feet of torque, but the original soul remains raw, mechanical, and reliable. The real-world resume of the J70 is unmatched. In Africa, it's the preferred vehicle for humanitarian convoys, medical aid groups, and even warlords. In Australia, it's the go-to vehicle for mining companies and cattle stations. And in the Middle East, it's not uncommon to find 30-year-old J70s still serving in frontline duty. One particularly brutal example? In the early 2000s, during conflict in Chad and Sudan, fleets of J70s were used as gun trucks, hauling weapons, troops, and supplies through sand, heat, and combat zones where nothing else survived. It's not just a truck, it's a global workhorse. While a Wrangler Rubicon might have lockers and off-road apps, the J70 has something far more valuable in the real world: unshakable durability. It doesn't break, and if it does, you can fix it with a wrench, not a diagnostic tool. There's a reason Toyota has kept the J70 in production for over 40 years with minimal changes. It works everywhere, and while it never needed to win off-road championships or make magazine covers, the 70 series has been silently outperforming legendary trucks like the Wrangler in places where getting stuck means risking your life, not just your pride. When it comes to forgotten 4x4s that could outwheel a Wrangler, the Land Cruiser J70 isn't forgotten in the places that matter. It's the rig you choose when the trail isn't a trail, it's a survival route. Number 4. Pinzgauer 710M, 1971 to 2000. If the Wrangler is a weekend warrior, the Pinzgauer 710M is a battlefield veteran. Designed by Steyr-Daimler Puch in Austria, the 710M wasn't made for mall crawls or Instagram flexing. It was engineered to carry troops, artillery, and medical gear through war zones, mountains, and swamps with surgical precision. Debuting in 1971, the Pinzgauer was a purpose-built military transport vehicle, but don't let the boxy looks fool you. Its engineering is unlike anything you'll find on a civilian off-roader. It rides on a central tube chassis with portal axles, giving it a massive ground clearance of over 16 inches without resorting to oversized tires. That means its differentials and undercarriage are tucked up high, far above where a Wrangler would be dragging its belly. Powered by an air-cooled 2.5-liter inline-4 petrol engine, making 87 horsepower and 133 pound-feet of torque, it doesn't sound impressive until you see where it can go. With full-time four-wheel drive, front and rear locking differentials, and a weight distribution nearly 50-50 thanks to its mid-engine layout, the Pinzgauer can tackle terrain that would leave even modified Jeeps winching themselves out. It can climb 45-degree slopes, ford water up to 27 inches deep, and operate in temperatures ranging from -40 degrees Celsius to +50 degrees Celsius. In real-world use, the 710M earned its stripes during military operations across Europe, Asia, and Africa. During the Balkan conflicts of the 90s, UN and NATO forces relied on the Pinzgauer for its uncanny ability to traverse mine-riddled terrain and mountain passes where no other wheeled vehicle could go. British and Swiss military forces still use them in harsh alpine conditions to this day. Perhaps the most shocking stat? A stock Pinzgauer can carry 10 soldiers and gear up a 60% incline while keeping all four wheels wheels on the ground. Its suspension articulation is extreme, and thanks to its lightweight construction around 4,000 pounds, it floats over mud, snow, and sand with ease. Meanwhile, the Wrangler, even in Rubicon trim, is heavier, shorter on clearance, and limited by conventional axles. What makes the Pinzgauer legendary is not speed or flash, its unrelenting function. It was never built for civilians, which is why it remains largely unknown to the average off-roader. But in the world of serious terrain and real missions, it outwheels the Wrangler by design and leaves it behind in the mud, both literally and metaphorically. When survival and mobility are non-negotiable, the Pinzgauer 710M delivers in ways the Wrangler only dreams of. Number 3. Dodge Power Wagon W300, 1957 to 1971. Long before the term 4x4 became trendy, the Dodge Power Wagon W300 was already crawling up mountains, fording rivers, and hauling loads through terrain that would paralyze a modern SUV. It wasn't made to look good in a dealership lot. It was made to work harder and last longer than anything else on wheels. The W300 was the heavy-duty, one-ton version of Dodge's civilian Power Wagon lineup, itself a descendant of the iconic World War II WC series military trucks. Launched in 1957 and continuing through the early 70s, the W300 was a brute featuring a solid front axle, a Dana 70 rear axle, dual rear wheels in many configurations, and a real-deal NP200 or NP205 transfer case. This thing wasn't just tough, it was industrial-strength tough. Under the hood, the W300 came with big block V8 options, like the 5.2-liter 318 cubic inch, and later the monstrous 6.9-liter 413 cubic inch V8, pushing up to 265 horsepower and over 400 pound-feet of torque numbers that put early Wranglers to shame. The W300 could pull a loaded trailer through mud, sand, or snow, and thanks to its 4-speed manual and low-range gearing, it crawled with tractor-like precision. One of the most famous W300s ever built was the 1967 Dodge Power Wagon fire truck, used by U.S. Forest Service units across the Rockies. These trucks were fitted with water tanks and pumps, and they climbed up rocky fire trails carrying over 2,000 pounds of equipment where helicopters couldn't even land. In several real incidents, especially during the Yellowstone fires of 1988, W300s were used to rescue trapped fire crews by bulldozing their way through the blaze while newer vehicles had already failed. Unlike modern Wranglers, which rely on traction control systems, electric lockers, and computer-managed suspensions, the W300 was all steel and muscle. It could take a beating, get welded back together in the field, and keep going. Its massive frame and leaf springs were built to carry loads, not comfort. But that's what makes it legendary. It's still found working on farms, fire lines, and snowplow duty across rural America. No, it didn't have sway bar disconnects or hill descent control, but it didn't need them. What the W300 had was brute strength, insane torque, and a track record of saving lives when conditions got ugly. When the trail ends and the real work begins, the Dodge W300 didn't blink, it bulldozed. Number 2. Kaiser Jeep M715, 1967 to 1969. The Kaiser Jeep M715 wasn't a truck designed for suburban trails or Instagram-worthy overlanding. It was a no-frills military-spec 4x4 built to go where roads didn't exist and to keep going under the harshest conditions imaginable. Born out of the U.S. Army's need for a lightweight, all-terrain cargo carrier during the Vietnam War, the M715 was a purpose-built warrior with battlefield credentials to prove it. Based on the civilian Jeep Gladiator J-Series pickup, but heavily modified for military use, it featured a boxed ladder frame, solid axles front and rear, leaf spring suspension, and a 24-volt waterproof electrical system. Its high ground clearance and aggressive 9.0 by 16 military tires gave it excellent off-road ability. With 100% mechanical systems, no sensors, no electronics, just metal and willpower. It had a fording depth of over 30 inches and a payload capacity of 1.25 tons, earning the nickname 5-quarter. Power came from a 230 cubic inch Tornado inline 6, making 130 horsepower and 210 pound-feet of torque, paired to a Warner T98 4-speed manual and a divorced NP200 transfer case. It wasn't fast, but it was unstoppable. In Vietnam, the M715 proved its worth in dense jungles, mud-soaked trails, and mountainous terrain where jeeps and tanks couldn't operate. During the Tet Offensive of 1968, M715s evacuated wounded troops through flooded, bombed-out terrain after helicopters were grounded pushing through debris-strewn paths and saving lives. Beyond U.S. service, it was adopted by militaries in South Korea, Italy, and Mexico, with some units lasting into the 1980s thanks to its fix-anywhere simplicity. Compared to the Wrangler, the M715 is raw, honest capability, no traction control, no diff locks, just steel, torque, and attitude. Today, surviving M715s are prized by collectors and hardcore off-road builders, some restored to military spec and others turned into modern monsters with Cummins swaps and portal axles. No matter how you configure it, the DNA of the M715 screams, "Go anywhere, bring back everyone." Number 1. Volvo C303, 1974 to 1984. If there's one 4x4 that can confidently look a Wrangler in the eye and say, "I've been places you've only seen in dreams," it's the Volvo C303, also known as the TGB11. This Swedish military machine isn't just rare or rugged, it's the very definition of off-road dominance, built for the harshest Scandinavian terrains and still revered today by overlanding and expedition purists. Produced from 1974 to 1984, the Volvo C303 was developed from the company's successful L3314 Laplander series and was designed to be an ultra-capable high-mobility tactical vehicle for the Swedish Armed Forces. The C303's basic layout was wildly different from your average off-roader. It used a forward control cab-over design for improved visibility and maneuverability, with portal axles that provided a staggering 16 inches of ground clearance, more than almost any civilian 4x4 even today. Under the hood sat a 3.0-liter inline-6 from Volvo's B30 engine family, the same power plant used in the Volvo 164 luxury sedan. It made around 125 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque, routed through a 4-speed manual transmission and a 2-speed transfer case. While those numbers might sound modest, they were tuned for low-end grunt perfect for climbing loose, icy slopes or trudging through deep, wet forests. And thanks to its lightweight construction, just under 4,500 pounds, and near-perfect approach and departure angles, the C303 could conquer terrain that would leave even lifted Wranglers spinning in defeat. What set it apart from the rest wasn't just spec sheets, it was real-world deployment. During Cold War exercises in the Arctic Circle, the C303 proved itself in temperatures below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, while crossing terrain so brutal that even tracked vehicles had trouble. Its sealed drivetrain and high-mounted air intake allowed for deep water fording over 30 inches stock, and many were even converted to amphibious prototypes. In one famous incident during a Swedish mountain rescue operation in the 1980s, a fleet of C303s was the only group of vehicles able to reach stranded climbers when helicopters were grounded by fog and modern snowcats became immobilized. The C303s slogged through meters of snow and loose shale to perform an extraction that would have been impossible for anything else on wheels. Built to outlast war, winter, and wilderness, the C303 is still running strong in private hands. You'll find them on expeditions across Iceland, Africa, and the Andes, usually carrying people, gear, and stories that prove this truck's reputation wasn't made in a showroom, but in survival zones. And unlike a Wrangler, you won't find one parked at the mall with chrome wheels and a bikini top. The C303 doesn't pose, it performs. In a world flooded with overbuilt, underused 4x4s, the Volvo C303 stands alone as a machine that's as pure as off-roading gets. It was never meant to be cool, it just ended up being the coolest thing on any trail. These 10 4x4s aren't just legends, they've proven their strength where it really counts. The Wrangler might be famous, but these machines have done the impossible. Which one is your favorite? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next adventure.